A congresswoman's fiery truth collides with a White House interruption so bold it silences the House, unleashing a speech so raw and powerful it forces a nation to confront its deepest divides. The House chamber was a cauldron of hushed reverence, its vaulted ceilings and storied walls bearing witness to a moment that would sear itself into the annals of American democracy. Every eye was riveted on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, her voice a beacon of lived experience and moral fire, forged in the crucible of one of America's toughest districts. She had been delivering a searing speech on economic inequality, her words a clarion call for justice, when a jolt of audacity shattered the chamber's decorum. From the gallery, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt rose, her voice slicing through the silence like a thunderclap. Congresswoman, with respect, those statistics don't reflect the real progress we've made. The breach of protocol was staggering, a press secretary daring to interrupt a House member mid-speech, an act so brazen it sent shockwaves through the chamber, murmurs rippling like wildfire among stunned representatives. But what followed was no mere clash of egos. Congresswoman Crockett's response transformed this moment of political theater into a profound reckoning, a speech so steeped in raw truth, so grounded in the struggles of real Americans, that it compelled lawmakers from both sides of the aisle to rise in awe. This was not just a rebuttal, it was a moral manifesto, a testament to the power of lived experience over polished talking points, a cry for justice that transcended partisan divides and shook the very soul of the nation's capital. Before we dive into this electrifying confrontation, drop a comment below to tell us where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button to never miss a moment when authentic voices pierce Washington's noise. Now, let's unravel the saga of how this clash between truth and power became a defining moment in American politics. The stage was set for a confrontation that laid bare the chasm between statistical rhetoric and the visceral reality of America's working families. To grasp the magnitude of this showdown, we must first understand the two women at its heart, their vastly different paths to power, and the forces that brought them to this explosive collision. Jasmine Crockett, at 42, was a force of nature in Congress, a Texas representative whose life was a testament to resilience. Raised in a working-class family in St. Louis, Missouri, she knew the sting of systemic barriers, the grind of families striving against impossible odds. Her journey to the House was a crucible of community organizing, civil rights law, and relentless battles in courtrooms and community centers across Texas. As a member of the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees, Crockett was a truth seeker, unafraid to ask questions that others shied away from. Her speeches were legendary, not for their polish, but for their raw authenticity, drawn from the lives of her constituents in Dallas, families who worked tirelessly, yet struggled to survive in an economy that seemed to forget them. On this fateful day, Crockett was addressing the House chamber on the gaping wounds of economic inequality, part of a bold legislative push to bridge the divide between America's haves and have-nots. Her speech was a masterclass in clarity, weaving together data on wage stagnation, soaring healthcare costs, and crumbling access to education into a narrative of human struggle. She spoke not from a script crafted by aides, but from the heart, her words echoing the pain of her district, where families toiled in the shadow of prosperity, yet fell further behind. It was in the midst of this impassioned plea for justice that Leavitt's interruption struck like a thunderbolt, a spark that would ignite a firestorm of truth and transform the chamber into a battleground of ideas. Karoline Leavitt, at a mere 27, was a prodigy of political communication, the youngest White House press secretary in the nation's history. Her ascent was nothing short of meteoric, fueled by razor-sharp media skills and an unyielding loyalty to the administration that had elevated her. With a background steeped in political messaging, Leavitt thrived in the high-stakes crucible of White House press briefings, where she parried hostile questions with a blend of polished statistics and unrelenting confidence. Her daily battles with the press corps had honed her into a formidable defender of administration policies, her responses a carefully crafted tapestry of data-driven arguments and boundless optimism. Leavitt's world was one of macroeconomic triumphs, unemployment rates, job creation numbers, GDP growth, metrics she wielded like a shield to deflect critics and paint a picture of universal prosperity. Yet her approach, while effective in the sterile confines of press rooms, often glossed over the human toll of policy, a disconnect that would prove her undoing in this pivotal moment. The tension between Crockett and Leavitt had been simmering for months, a slow-burning fuse ready to explode. Crockett's relentless oversight work had repeatedly punctured the administration's rosy claims of economic progress, exposing gaps in opportunity that glossy statistics failed to capture. Leavitt, in her press briefings, had dismissed such critiques as partisan posturing, doubling down on data that painted a portrait of a thriving nation. Their paths had crossed in formal hearings and media exchanges, each encounter a skirmish in a larger war of ideas. But this day's confrontation was different, a clash in the sacred space of the House chamber, where centuries-old norms demanded respect and order. Leavitt's decision to interrupt was more than a breach of decorum. It was a calculated gambit, part of the administration's aggressive strategy to silence narratives that challenged their narrative of economic victory. The White House was hypersensitive to critiques of inequality, viewing them as direct assaults on their signature achievements. By daring to disrupt Crockett in the People's House, Leavitt had crossed a sacred line, setting the stage for a response that would redefine the very nature of political discourse. The House chamber was a theater of unparalleled gravitas, its 435 members a living mosaic of America's political soul. From progressive Democrats who shared Crockett's vision of justice to conservative Republicans aligned with the administration's policies, the room was a powder keg of competing ideologies. Leavitt's outburst stunned them all, a violation of the chamber's hallowed traditions that left representatives frozen in disbelief. Murmurs of shock rippled through the air as lawmakers craned their necks, their eyes darting. Between Crockett at the podium and Leavitt standing defiantly in the gallery, the Speaker of the House, caught off guard by the unprecedented breach, seemed poised to restore order, but Crockett seized control with a gesture of unyielding authority. Raising her hand, she addressed the chair, her voice steady, yet laced with a fire that burned with purpose. Mr. Speaker, I yield to address the comments from the gallery as they directly challenge the accuracy of my presentation to this body. The Speaker, visibly uneasy in the face of this extraordinary moment, granted her request with a nod. The gentlewoman from Texas may proceed. The chamber held its collective breath as Crockett turned her gaze toward Leavitt, her eyes locking onto the press secretary with an intensity that commanded the room. I appreciate the press secretary's concern for accurate information, she began, her tone professional but edged with an unmistakable steel. Since she has chosen to interrupt the proceedings of this chamber, perhaps she would care to specify which of my statistics she deems inaccurate. It was a masterful move, transforming Leavitt's disruption into a direct challenge, forcing the press secretary to justify her audacity before the nation's lawmakers. Leavitt, standing resolute in the gallery, doubled down on her position. Congresswoman, the unemployment rate in your district has dropped by 2 percentage points since this administration took office. Your remarks fail to acknowledge the significant economic progress we've achieved. Leavitt's response laid bare the chasm between their worlds. Her statistic was a snapshot, a macroeconomic boast that glossed over the human cost of an economy that left millions behind. Crockett, rooted in the daily struggles of her constituents, saw through the veneer of such claims. I thank the press secretary for that statistic, she replied, her voice calm but unyielding, a beacon of truth in the storm. But allow me to provide the context that reveals the true economic reality facing the families I represent. She stepped toward a chart prepared for her original speech, her movements deliberate, her focus absolute, as if the weight of her district's struggles rested on her shoulders. The unemployment rate you cite is indeed accurate, but let me show you what those numbers mean for the people I serve. In my district, the median household income remains $12,000 below the national average. 43% of our families spend over 30% of their income on housing costs alone. The specificity of her data landed like a thunderbolt, a stark contrast to Leavitt's broad, impersonal claim. Crockett was dismantling the administration's narrative of progress, not with rhetoric, but with the unassailable truth of lived experience. When we speak of unemployment rates, she continued, her voice rising with a conviction that filled the chamber, we must also acknowledge that many of the jobs created pay wages too low to cover even the most basic necessities. A family with two parents working full-time minimum wage jobs still qualifies for federal assistance because their combined income cannot sustain them. She turned her gaze toward Leavitt, her eyes blazing with a purpose that transcended politics. These are not partisan talking points, Madam Press Secretary. These are the realities of working families who are employed yet struggling to build a secure future for their children. Leavitt, undeterred by the weight of Crockett's words, attempted to counter with more administration talking points. Congresswoman, this administration has created millions of jobs and achieved record-low unemployment across multiple demographic categories. Our policies have delivered the strongest economy in decades. Her words, polished and rehearsed, echoed the White House's mantra of success, but they rang hollow against the raw, grounded truth of Crockett's testimony. The exchange was a revelation, exposing the fundamental tension between macroeconomic boasts and the human toll of economic inequality. Crockett seized the moment with a response that was both measured and fierce, a masterclass in moral clarity. I do not dispute that jobs have been created, she said, her voice steady but burning with intensity. However, I submit that the true measure of our economic success is not merely the quantity of jobs, but the quality of opportunity they provide to American workers and their families. She moved to another visual aid, her gestures commanding the attention of every soul in the chamber. While unemployment has indeed decreased, wages for working-class families have not kept pace with the rising costs of housing, healthcare, and educational investments. The result is a nation of workers who are laboring harder than ever yet, finding it increasingly difficult to achieve the dream of economic mobility. Her words were a call to conscience, a plea to look beyond the cold numbers and see the families they represented, the dreams they crushed. Furthermore, she continued, her voice now a force that seemed to shake the very walls. When we discuss economic progress, we must confront the truth that these gains are not distributed equally. Rural communities, urban centers with high poverty rates, regions scarred by industrial decline. They face challenges that national averages erase from view. The chamber was undergoing a transformation, the initial shock of Leavitt's interruption giving way to a profound, almost sacred attention to the issues at hand. Crockett's methodical, data-driven approach, fused with her intimate knowledge of her constituents' lives, was shifting the dynamic in a way that few could have anticipated. What had begun as a breach of protocol was now a high-stakes policy debate, a clash of philosophies about how America defines and measures its success. Leavitt, perhaps sensing that her interruption had inadvertently handed Crockett a platform to deliver a message far more powerful than her original speech, made one final attempt to steer the conversation back to the administration's narrative. Congresswoman, while I appreciate your concerns for your constituents, I think we should focus on the objective data that demonstrates this administration's policies have delivered tangible results for all American families. It was precisely the opening Crockett needed to deliver a response that would etch this moment into the annals of political history. "Madam Press Secretary," she said, her voice now a potent blend of resolute determination and raw, unfiltered emotion. "I want to thank you for raising the question of objective data, because that gets to the very heart of what we are discussing here today." She stepped away from her prepared charts and visual aids, her gaze sweeping across the chamber, her words carrying the weight of a lifetime spent fighting for those left behind. "You speak of historic economic growth, and I do not dispute that certain economic indicators have shown improvement. But I want to share with you, and with every member of this chamber, what objective data looks like when it is measured not in spreadsheets or press releases, but in the lives of the people we are sworn to serve." The chamber fell into a deathly silence, every representative transfixed as Crockett spoke from the depths of her soul. "In my district, I have sat with families where both parents work multiple jobs, yet they cannot afford the prescription medications their children need to thrive. I have counseled young adults who hold college degrees, the pride of their families, but are forced to live with their parents because the cost of housing in their own communities is beyond their reach. I have held the hands of seniors who must choose between buying groceries to feed themselves and paying the heating bills to keep their homes warm in winter." Her voice trembled with the pain of those stories, yet it burned with a defiant fire that refused to be silenced. "These families are not reflected in your unemployment statistics, Madam Press Secretary, because they are working. They are not captured in your job creation numbers because they already have employment, but they are struggling every single day in an economic system that demands everything from them while offering less and less security for their futures." Crockett turned her gaze back toward Leavitt, but her words were a clarion call meant for the entire chamber, for the nation beyond its walls. When we measure economic success, we must ask ourselves a fundamental question. Are our policies creating genuine opportunities for families to build better lives, or are we merely generating statistics that allow us to claim victory while real people continue to suffer? The chamber was spellbound, representatives abandoning their usual distractions, phones, side conversations, paperwork, to give her their undivided attention. The silence was profound, a testament to the power of a truth so raw it could not be ignored. "I want to be absolutely clear," Crockett continued, her voice rising like a crescendo in a symphony of justice. "This is not a partisan issue. There are families struggling in Republican districts and Democratic districts, in rural towns and urban centers, in every state and every region of this great country. The question before us is not whether we have different political philosophies about economic policy. The question is whether we, as leaders, have the courage to acknowledge that our current approach is failing to reach all of the people who need and deserve economic opportunity." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the chamber like a sacred vow, the faces of her colleagues reflecting a mix of awe, conviction, and quiet introspection. "And let me say this," she added, her tone now a blend of challenge and hope. "The interruption we witness today is emblematic of a broader problem in our political discourse. When we respond to heartfelt concerns about economic inequality with cold, impersonal statistics about overall growth, we are missing the fundamental point of what government is meant to achieve for the American people." The transformation in the Iowa chamber was palpable, electric, a moment of clarity in an institution too often mired in division. What had begun as an uncomfortable breach of protocol had evolved into one of those rare instances when the House of Representatives fulfilled its highest purpose, a forum for serious, soul-searching discussion about the challenges facing the nation. "So, I want to thank the press secretary for her interruption," Crockett declared, her voice now ringing with a resolution that signaled she was building toward a powerful conclusion. because it has given me the opportunity to clarify what we are truly discussing when we talk about economic policy in this country. We are not simply debating numbers on a chart or arguing over which administration deserves credit for this or that indicator. We are determining what kind of nation we want to be, what obligations we have as leaders to ensure that economic prosperity creates genuine, tangible opportunity for every single American, no matter where they live or what they look like. Her words were a rallying cry, a vision of a nation where opportunity was not a privilege reserved for the few, but a promise kept for all. The response from her colleagues was nothing short of seismic. Representatives began to rise, first from the Democratic side of the aisle, their applause a tribute to a truth they shared. Then, slowly, miraculously, Republicans joined them, their ovation not a partisan gesture, but a recognition of a moral leadership that transcended political lines. The standing ovation stretched on for minutes, an extraordinary display of bipartisan reverence for a moment that had touched something deeper than politics. It was not the rote applause of partisan loyalty, but a genuine, heartfelt appreciation for a voice that had spoken truth to power with unmatched clarity and courage. Even Karoline Leavitt, still standing in the gallery, seemed visibly moved, her expression softening as she witnessed a masterclass in authentic leadership, her earlier confidence replaced by a quiet acknowledgement of the moment's gravity. The immediate aftermath of this extraordinary exchange was a departure from the usual Washington playbook. Instead of descending into partisan spin or damage control, lawmakers from both parties focused on the substantive issues Crockett had so powerfully raised. Republican members approached her after the session, their conversations not about political point scoring, but about the economic struggles in their own districts. Rural communities grappling with job loss, small towns where families faced the same housing and healthcare burdens Crockett had described. Democratic colleagues, inspired by her example, spoke passionately about the need for a new kind of political communication, one that prioritized authenticity and human impact over polished sound bites. The chamber, for a fleeting moment, was not a battleground, but a crucible of shared purpose, a place where leaders grappled with the real challenges facing their constituents. The media response was equally remarkable, a rare break from the sensationalism that often dominates political coverage. Rather than fixating on the protocol breach or its political fallout, news outlets across the spectrum dove into the economic data Crockett had presented, sparking a national conversation about how America measures progress. Editorial boards, from progressive to conservative, hailed her for elevating the discourse above partisan talking points, her speech a beacon in a political landscape too often shrouded in fog. The New York Times called it a moment of moral clarity in a divided Congress, while the Wall Street Journal praised her for forcing a reckoning on the human cost of economic policy. Social media erupted with clips of her speech, hashtags like Crockett Speaks Truth, trending as Americans shared stories of their own struggles, amplifying her message far beyond the Capitol's walls. The White House's reaction was unprecedented, a testament to the undeniable power of Crockett's words. Rather than defending Leavitt's interruption or dismissing Crockett's critique, the administration announced within days that it would undertake a comprehensive review of how economic progress was measured and communicated to the public. In a rare moment of humility, the president himself acknowledged the limitations of macroeconomic statistics, admitting that numbers alone don't tell the full story of what American families are facing. It was a direct nod to Crockett's argument, a recognition that her voice had shifted the national conversation in a way few could have anticipated. The review, led by top economic advisors, promised to incorporate metrics like wage growth, housing affordability, and economic mobility, precisely the issues Crockett had championed. For Karoline Leavitt, the encounter was nothing short of transformative, a turning point in her understanding of political communication and public service. In the press briefings that followed, Her responses to questions about economic policy took on a new depth, a nuance that had been absent before. She began weaving data on wages, housing costs, and mobility into her presentations, a clear sign that she had internalized Crockett's lesson. Policy must reflect the lived experiences of people, not just the sterile triumph of numbers. Her briefings, once exercises in defensive combat, became more reflective, acknowledging the challenges facing working families even as she defended administration policies. Leavitt's evolution was a quiet but powerful acknowledgement of Crockett's impact, proof that even the most steadfast defenders of the status quo could be moved by truth. The legislative impact of Crockett's speech was profound, a catalyst for action in a Congress too often paralyzed by division. Her words became a rallying point for bipartisan efforts to tackle economic inequality through practical, human-centered solutions. Lawmakers from both parties began collaborating on legislation to address housing affordability, boost wage growth, and expand economic mobility, their work fueled by the shared recognition that Crockett had articulated: America's prosperity was meaningless if it left millions behind. Committees held hearings to explore the issues she raised, inviting economists, community leaders, and everyday Americans to testify about the real-world impact of economic policy. The authentic, inclusive discussion Crockett had sparked created a rare space for problem-solving, a reminder that common challenges could bridge even the widest partisan divides. Educational institutions seized on the exchange as a case study in effective political communication and moral leadership. Universities and communication. Schools analyzed how Crockett had transformed an interruption into an opportunity for deeper engagement, her authenticity a blueprint for aspiring leaders. Her ability to blend rigorous data with personal storytelling became a model for how to advocate effectively in a polarized world. Students dissected her speech, marveling at how she had turned a moment of disruption into a platform for unity, her words a masterclass in speaking truth to power. The exchange was incorporated into curricula, a lesson in how leaders can cut through political theater to address the issues that matter most. The broader impact on political discourse was nothing short of revolutionary. Crockett's response set a new standard for how public officials discuss economic policy, emphasizing the importance of human impact alongside statistical indicators. Other members of Congress began to emulate her approach, weaving the lived experiences of their constituents into their speeches, prioritizing stories of struggle and resilience over abstract policy arguments. The shift was subtle but profound, a move toward a politics that valued people over points, truth over triumph. Editorial writers noted the change, with The Washington Post declaring that Crockett has shown us what leadership looks like in an age of division, while National Review called her speech a challenge to both parties to rethink how we talk about progress. Perhaps most significantly, the encounter demonstrated the enduring power of genuine moral leadership in an institution often criticized for its gridlock and cynicism. By speaking from the heart of her experience, by focusing on shared challenges rather than political advantage, Crockett had forged a moment of unity in a chamber too often defined by discord. Her stand was a powerful reminder that democracy thrives when leaders choose substance over spectacle, when they embrace the complexity of human struggles rather than hiding behind sanitized statistics. It was a call to every American to demand more from their leaders, to insist on a politics that serves the common good rather than the partisan score. The story of this extraordinary exchange is more than a political moment. It's a testament to the resilience of democratic institutions when leaders wield truth with courage and conviction. Jasmine Crockett's response to an unprecedented interruption was a beacon of hope, proof that one voice, grounded in authenticity and fueled by principle, can change the course of a nation. It challenges us all to ask, what kind of country do we want to be, and what will we do to ensure that opportunity is a promise kept for every American? If this saga of moral courage and unyielding truth stirred your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of leaders who break through the noise to make a difference. In the comments, tell us, which moment in Crockett's powerful stand resonated most with you? Share stories of moral leadership you've witnessed in your own communities, moments when truth triumphed over division. Together, we can build a politics rooted in authenticity, unity, and justice, a politics worthy of the people it serves.